Right, welcome back to our discussion of your first assignment. We're going to be looking at question 2 in this video. So question 2 starts off with a scenario. Karabo has just come back from her teaching experience at an under-resourced school. During a reflection session in class, Karabo indicated that she enjoyed being at the school, but was beyond frustrated due to the lack of technological devices that could have allowed her to practice the skills she had learnt at college. Below is an extract that Karabo said she used to develop her grade 10 learners' comprehension skills. Below is a short extract from the novel Cry the Beloved Country. So a couple of things that I want you to have picked up on already. So this is an under-resourced school. So in any discussion or any question, you have to remember the fact that it is under-resourced. So you can't rely on technology. So Karabo was frustrated due to the lack of technological devices that could have allowed her to practice the skills she learned at college. Now, this is something that I'm sure has been touched on in a lot of your courses and is going to be touched on in your teaching pracs, etc., etc. This idea that in college you will learn a lot of fantastic ideas and you will find so many amazing examples that in reality cannot be implemented as is in a lot of South African classrooms, because in the classroom there are a lot of restrictions. So in college we learn all sort of the best case scenarios or the ideal situations. In the classroom, it's not often that you're going to be in a classroom where you have the ideal situation to implement these fantastic ideas without any restrictions. So you do have to bear that in mind. So we have an excerpt, so you are going to have to refer to that excerpt. And also you are teaching a grade 10 class. So under-resourced, lack of technological devices, difficulty or inability to apply, to practice the skills learned in the classroom. There is an extract and grade 10 class, and the skills you are teaching are comprehension skills. So those are all the things you need to pick up from that scenario. I'm not going to read the excerpt to you because I know you can all read it for yourselves. So question 2.1. Choose one of the teaching approaches to literature that you would use to teach this excerpt from the novel. Define the approach and justify why this approach is suitable to use in teaching this excerpt. Provide practical examples for your justification. So you want to go back to the teaching approaches for teaching literature, and you will find that, I stand to be corrected, it's Learning Unit 1. I believe it is Theme 2 or Theme 3. No, Learning Unit 1, Theme 4, I think. So you go back to Learning Unit 1, you find those teaching approaches, choose one. So you have to choose one. Now, you're going to have to think of question 2 when you are doing question 1, and we'll see why in a moment. You have to define it. So that's very straightforward. Then you have to say why this particular approach is good to use to teach this particular excerpt to a grade 10 class in this particular context. So under-resourced, lack of technology, grade 10s, teaching comprehension, and then you're using literature to teach comprehension. So you need to look at the excerpt carefully, decide which approach is going to be best to use this excerpt to teach literature, focusing on comprehension to a grade 10 class in an under-resourced school. So when you choose your Your approach, there's a reason why you choose that approach. So you have to say why you've chosen that approach, and you have to provide practical examples. So you have to say, use examples from the excerpt. Use examples about teaching in an under-resourced grade 10 classroom, for example. So let's look at this rubric. Definition of teaching approach. Teaching approach is incorrectly defined or unclear versus teaching approach is clearly and accurately defined with depth. So you want to do more than just quote from the ARC material. That's not going to get you very high marks at this level. So you really want to unpack it and explain it really well. Then your justification and examples. Justification is weak or lacks practical examples. So you need to have both. You need to have a strong justification and you need to have good practical examples. So middle ground is justifies the suitability of the approach with relevant examples. So you've said why this approach is good and it makes sense why, and you've provided some practical examples. The high end provides a convincing justification. So I'm not reading and going, yeah, okay, that makes sense, versus, yes, absolutely, that makes complete sense why you would choose this approach, and is supported by well-integrated practical examples. So you're not just going to at the end say, well, this is an example. You're going to, as you are discussing why this is a good approach to use, you are then using a practical and specific example of how this is going to be used in the classroom to show why this approach is good. Okay, so now we're going to go to question 2.2. Explain the purpose of a lesson introduction. Design an original and engaging lesson introduction for this reading lesson. Ensure your introduction is clearly linked to the teaching approach you identified in question 2.1. So you have to know what an introduction does, and you have to explain clearly why we have these lesson introductions. Then, knowing what an introduction does, you have to provide a practical, original lesson introduction for this reading lesson. So you're doing a reading lesson. You're using this excerpt. You are teaching a grade 10 class, under-resourced school. You are teaching comprehension skills in a reading lesson using a specific approach that you identified in question 2.1. So it has to be original and engaging. What that means is, yes, you can take ideas from other places, but this has to be your own idea. It has to be something that shows you have thought about it. And it has to be interesting. It has to be the sort of introduction that when I read it, I go, wow, I would like to have been in that class. That's the sort of thing that I would have enjoyed having when I was in grade 10. You have to ensure your introduction is clearly linked to the teaching approach. So what we're looking at here is, does your introduction work in the context that you have? Grade 10, under-resourced, reading lesson based on comprehension using this excerpt. Does it fulfill everything that an introduction is meant to do? Grabs the learner's attention, introduces the main ideas, etc., etc. And obviously it needs to be linked to that approach for the rest of your teaching lesson. So the purpose of a lesson introduction, limited or unclear explanation of the purpose, insightful explanation linked to reading pedagogy. So what you really want to do is you want to explain the introduction, specifically the introduction for reading lessons. You're going to The design of the lesson introduction. Activity is unoriginal, unclear, or poorly linked to the text. Versus highly engaging, creative introduction, strongly linked to the text and the approach. So you really want to focus on something original, something entertaining, something that is clearly linked to both the extract and the approach. And the interesting part here is to also make sure that it's really practical for the context that you have. And then finally, alignment with teaching approach, weak or no alignment to the chosen teaching approach, clear alignment to the teaching approach, strong, purposeful alignment to the teaching approach. So it's not just, okay, I can see what approach you're using. It's, okay, you've taken that approach and you've really built that approach into your introduction. And that is the video for question 2. In our next video, we are going to go on to question 3.